You know, sometimes we don't complete all of our yearly goals, and unfortunately for me, 2024, I said I'm going to read all of the Frank Herbert Dune books. And I got 5 out of 6 done, but I did not quite make it to the end of the year. So it is January 2025, and I have finally finished Chapterhouse DUNE. I actually found a lot of time to read this because for this entire first week of the year, I have been incredibly sick and pretty much quarantined to my couch. So what better time than to pull out this book on occasion and try to read it. And I'm still not 100% better, so I apologize for the raspy voice and just the difficulty speaking. I got hit with something. But hey, as I'm quarantined, bedridden on my couch, what better time than to pick up, Chapterhouse DUNE and try to finish it, of which I did. I'm very confused by it, and unfortunately, similar to Heretics of Dune, I still feel the same way about this book as I did that book, where I'm just not as big of a fan of this new direction the Dune series took after God Emperor, as well with a new ensemble of characters. Although I did warm up to them a little bit more in this book, still they are nowhere near the leagues of the characters that we began this journey with. With Paul, with Stilgar, with Jessica, all of those original characters, Alia, I miss them dearly. And these new characters, Adrade, or however you pronounce her name, Teg, the new Duncan Idaho, they're all fine. Shienna, I really wanted more from her, but we'll get into it. They're all fine, but they're just not quite as good as the characters we began with. But anyways, yes, going to talk about Chapterhouse DUNE, and this is going to be an interesting book to try to talk about because, as known, outside of the context of the universe of the story itself, Frank Herbert, the author, passed away after writing this book, and he had more books planned, and this is definitely not the ending of a series, although it is a little bit more of an ending than I was expecting. It is still a cliffhanger, and it is still extremely open-ended, and there's tons of story points that aren't finished up on, but at the same time, the way that this book ends, it kind of makes sense in a weird way. So it's not an ending, but it is. I don't know how to explain it. The characters just kind of go off with different intentions and ideas in mind as to what's going to happen. You're kind of left with this idea that, things are going to forever continue as the cycle does. And sort of in a weird way, it kind of makes sense for the themes of the entire series. Just this idea that there's always going to be these forces of power, and then humanity in one way or another is going to take that power and try to utilize it to control. Also with Chapterhouse, I think he did do a better job showing the nuance of the Honored Matre, sort of the darker, more heavily sexualized version of the Bene Gesserit, as well as the Bene Gesserit themselves. There's a lot more discovery of, individual characters working within it. And this current version of the Bene Gesserit that exists in Chapterhouse DUNE, is similar, but yet very, very different than the one that we witnessed thousands of years ago in the original Dune novel. So there's an attempt at humanizing them even more, even though they always have been humanized. I mean, I would say really the Harkonnens were the only group of characters that were exaggeratedly, dark and sort of evil, under the rule of Vladimir Harkonnen, although, we're mostly seeing things from his perspective, and he was an evil dude, so it makes a little bit more sense, I guess. But here with the Bene Gesserit and the Honored Matre, there's a lot more behind the scenes that you get to see, and I guess that was a good idea. Especially with the final Dune book, the final book that Frank Herbert wrote, is that, the Bene Gesserit has been a presence ever since the very beginning. And even in the first book, I think I called them like a cult of witches, is what they reminded me of. But here, it really shows the humanity of them, despite their desperation to control. But, what I have found, and I'm not a super intelligent guy by any means. I'm just a dude that reads a lot of stories, so I am probably missing a lot of understanding of what Frank Herbert was getting at. But just from my small intellect trying to pick this up, after reading all of the Frank Herbert Dune books, it really seems like he has a lot to say on the methods that humans use to control things, whether it's through government systems or through religion. And although there is a lot of cynicism pointed towards that, he also never hesitates to show the humanity of the individuals. You know, it's like when you have one singular person, the humanity of the individual is usually pretty complex, you know? And then when you expand that to have groups and mobs and organizations or whatever it is, then it's like the more that you expand out, the more people that you involve, the more collective, hive mind, dark evil that it kind of becomes, you know, when you have that sort of group mentality, those echo chambers, you know, that we call them online now. And that is true. Like if you talk to one person one-on-one, you can have this like deeply nuanced conversation most of the time, if you really, you know, if you kind of get them to open up to you and talk to you. But then when you're talking to their group or like a group representative, the group is just like hive mind, you know, black and white, yes and no, this is the way it is. I don't know if I'm making any sense right now. This video is obviously not scripted. I'm just going off the top of my head. But basically what I'm saying is I think that Frank Herbert really does believe in the humanity of the individual, but he heavily criticizes what happens when we sort of blindly give ourselves over to the collective. That's, I think, the core theme of Dune, in my opinion, which could definitely be wrong. That's my cat. Dracula, stop. But unfortunately, I do have to say, Chapterhouse DUNE, overall, I wasn't a big fan of, and I think, excuse me, the majority of the reason why is just because I feel like, although it is exploring the humanity of particular characters, it doesn't really seem to have any kind of flow. Like, it doesn't seem to have an objective to achieve, like a place that we're going. At least I don't see it. And maybe if there was more books, I would. But it just seems like it's going from random event to random event. And it is showing more of the conflict between the Bene Gesserit and the Honored Matres and all of that stuff. But it just doesn't seem to land on like a particular direction. It just doesn't really know where to go. There's a lot of characters like Duncan Idaho that, you know, spend most of the book doing nothing, you know, just stuck in a spaceship. And I really wanted more from it. The thing that I love about the first 3 Dune books in particular is that there's a destination point. We have the golden path to get to, right? Like there is a plan of attack here that even if he didn't plan it in the first book, makes perfect sense reading from book 1, 2, and 3. Like there is an ultimate conclusion point that we are reaching towards, you know, getting to the God Emperor, and we're building our way up to it. As for these 2 books, Heretics and Chapterhouse, I don't sense any kind of like cohesion. I don't sense any kind of destination that we're destined to get to. And honestly, the book not having a cohesive direction wouldn't bother me as much because I am very much a character over plot kind of guy. But unfortunately, I just don't really care about this new cast of characters that much. I thought the most interesting character of them all was Miles Tegg, who dies at the end of Heretics, although he is brought back as a Gola in this book, although he is a child, and they do some questionable things with him as a child. You know, I don't think artists or authors or storytellers need to be some sort of moral guideline for us in their writings. I mean, if things happen in their universe that would be a little bit shocking to us, I mean, I don't think they should omit it just because it's weird, but at the same time, I don't need as much detail about it, just tell me that it happens. But yeah, seeing Tegg as a child Gola was not as fun as seeing him be this, you know, badass military leader from this long Atreides bloodline from Heretics of Dune. So I actually liked him a lot better in that version. And it seems like they just needed a guy to fill that role. They needed that sort of military strategist. And they don't really go too much into detail about when he awakened, you know, his like superpowers and whatnot in the last one. They talk about it, but at least I don't remember. Like, I don't know. Like, I've been sick this whole week, so I read this whole book in a fever dream, so forgive me. But anyways, I think they talk about it, but they don't really go too much into detail about it. And what else? So, yeah, Duncan Idaho, the Gola from the last book, and the again, I forget her name. Yeah, Duncan and Merbella. So they are here mostly on the ship with this new version of Skytail, the last of the Lexu, or however you're supposed to pronounce it. They're here on Chapterhouse, which is this hidden planet from the Bene Gesserit, in which they brought a sandworm from Dune, which no longer exists. So this is the only Dune book of the Frank Herbert series that does not feature the planet Dune. Interesting. But they brought a sandworm to this new planet, and every other time that anybody has attempted to do this, the worms didn't take to the new planet, and they were never able to replicate Dune. However, here they have a couple of benefits. One is that they have Shienna, who is somebody that can somehow communicate with the worms. It's still not really fully explained. At least I missed that if they did explain it. And just like, and so like the worms are starting to thrive. Like there's smaller worms. It's like, it's not Dune yet, you know, they're not cultivating spice, but like it's the farthest they've ever gotten to be able to make this work. And so it's like, all right, this is like something's happening here. We can't let anybody find this place. So just like Heretics of Dune, the things that I find the most interesting about the book are the things that are not expanded upon. Like, I thought Shienna was going to essentially be our new main character. When you created a character that can talk to the sandworms and, you know, be able to communicate with them on some level, like, I would imagine this has to be some incredible power passed down because of a result of Leto Atreides or something. Like, there's got to be something here, and I just don't feel like we got enough of her, especially in Heretics. You know, it's like she had this big introduction, and then she was just kind of there, and I felt like the same thing here. It's like, you know, she's only kind of pulled out when she needs to be utilized to do something, but she's not as developed as a character as the other characters, and that's a bummer for me because of all the new characters, she was the most interesting to me, and they don't do as much with her. Just the same, they talk about the Honored Matres. Actually, you know, the reason that they're here, that they're kind of interacting with the Bene Gesserit again, is because they're afraid of something greater. And the mystery of that was really intriguing. I'm like, okay, what is it out there? And it's alluded to that it's like this highly evolved form of the face dancers that were once controlled, but now have achieved this massive level of prescience. I think it's the same characters. I could be wrong, but Duncan Idaho kind of sees them in a vision because he's also got the prescience and he remembers all of the other versions of Duncan Idaho. So every single Duncan Idaho that's ever existed, you know, he's got like the memories of. But he also sees these two characters that seem to be beyond everything else. They seem to have achieved some kind of almost godlike status, right, out there in the universe. And I'm just like, what is that all about? Like, give me more of that. And they don't. All they do is just kind of mention that it's out there. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, the thing that I found the most intriguing and the thing that I want to know the most about is the thing that the book just doesn't go into that deeply. And it's, yeah, I felt the same thing with Heretics. Like, all the things I found the most interesting in that book are just what it didn't focus on. Instead, we get a lot of just talk about the Bene Gesserit and a lot of conversation, similar to God Emperor in a way, where most of the book is just conversation, which can be okay, but it just stopped working for me after a certain point in time. And similar to points in God Emperor and similar to Heretics for me, there's just a lot of moments in this book that I kind of struggled to continue to pay attention. Maybe that's just my problem. Maybe I'm just not enough of a novel reader. I need to get back into reading more to really appreciate it. I don't know. But the thing is, I didn't have any problem with the first three books. Like, these were all gold in my opinion. And it's only after that that I started to kind of fall off from the series. And I felt the same way about this one. So Yeah, so the honored matres, they have this like super weapon as well. They've already eradicated Dune. They eradicate another Bene Gesserit planet, so they're going around like, you know, just destroying all these Bene Gesserits. But the story builds up to sort of a separation because you have Duncan and Marbella that are together at the beginning of the book, but then they start to go their separate ways towards the end because Marbella kind of rises in the ranks and takes over the leadership of a portion, or maybe it is like the leadership. I don't know. Somebody explain that to me. Of the whole the honored matres, and she's also part of the Bene Gesserit, so she's sort of the missing link to kind of pull those together. So, you know, it feels like Frank Herbert is kind of like going from character to character, where it's like Duncan Idaho might be the next, you know, chosen Kwisatz Haderach, but then now it seems like it might be Marbella. Not that she has the prescience, but that she's sort of like this merger of all of these different factions together. But that happens, and then Duncan and Sienna are kind of, you know, going in a separate direction than that, not as a couple, but just like an ideological difference there. And so, you know, the sort of like this slow separation of them, although the romance is just not strong enough for me to like really care that they're being pulled in different directions. It just feels like, okay, that's what they're doing. Like Duncan Idaho, I love him, but like he just doesn't feel like it's not like a torn lovers thing. I don't know. It just didn't quite work for me. And I don't even know if that was the intent. It might not have been. But ultimately, also, there's other weird shit going on in this book. Like, I don't know, like cat people and cyborgs. So the whole thing, at least as far as I understand, is that, you know, way before the original Dune began, there was this sort of machine uprising that was stopped. And then ever since then, it's sort of been taboo to deal with, you know, machines or AI or robotics or anything like that. But there's a cyborg character that is built in this using that sort of, you know, taboo technology. And I don't know where it was going to go with that. It's not really followed up on much. It's just, yeah, hey, we can create cyborgs, so why not? If I had to guess, because this book does end open-ended, you don't really know what's going to happen. Marbella is, you know, propelled to leadership, but okay. So if I had to take a guess, and I have not looked into this, I don't know what the Brian Herbert, you know, continuations are. I don't know what the planned continuation for Frank Herbert was, but I'm just gonna wager my own, you know, tinfoil hat fan theory of where this was going. The way that I see this ending up is pretty much bringing us full circle to similar events that happened in the original Dune. What I can see happening here with the scattering and, you know, kind of having all these new planets, it seems like Chapterhouse is the only planet that is really allowing the worms to thrive, eventually creating a new Dune. And I do believe that we will have similar events play out to where this planet is going to be coveted, and particular people will sort of guide and rule over it for a time, although it will begin to have its own native inhabitants that will be, you know, different from the Fremen, but still a representation of what the Fremen were. With the cyborg stuff happening, I could see the same sort of thing where the robotics and the AI gain control. I mean, if you have a cyborg character, you know, that kind of represents, you know, Skynet taking over the world and everything, maybe the cyborgs rise up and become their own faction, and eventually once they're taken down, it's once again decreed to everybody to say, hey, no more robotics, no more AI. So a similar thing will happen with the merger of the Bene Gesserit and the Honored Matre. As that evolves over the next, you know, hundreds of thousands of years, that will become it'll have a new title, but it will represent the same thing that the Bene Gesserit did from before, which it already seems like that is. Like, it seems like those two factions were one and then kind of separated, with one being more of the like physical, emotional, sexual side, and one being more of like the strategist side, both using their own methods of control, but then eventually coming together for a full controlling entity, which was what the original Bene Gesserits were in the original book. So I see everything kind of coming full circle to the point where if there was a third book to end, you know, going further into the future, as these books tend to do, and then eventually ending up with a new desert planet, a new humanity after AI is taken out, a new Bene Gesserit, a new group of Fremen, and then we start back from square one, essentially saying that humanity, as long as it exists, is doomed to repeat itself, all of its mistakes and all of its ideas. And, you know, we are connected by these huge historical events that shift and change and manipulate things into something new, whether that's the God Emperor or whether it's some kind of ancient war that happens before the original story. You know, these big pivotal events happen, and it's like you know, the knot in the string that just ties it all together, but really the string is just in a circle. It's just connected. That's just my theory. I am probably super off base, and that was probably extremely stupid to say, but that's just where I see it going. But anyways, I now have to conclude the Dune series, so thank you guys for watching these reviews. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with me. I'm sorry it took me so long to get through them all. You know, I've taken many breaks to work on other videos, and just, you know, some of them took me longer to get through because I wasn't as invested, but now after completing them all, I can say that I'm glad that I went through them. And if you guys enjoyed these book reviews, I want to do more book reviews on the channel. Once again, it's not my main thing. I mostly talk about movies and anime and TV shows and stuff, so books are a little bit fewer and far between on the channel. But if you like these reviews, I want to do some more. And a lot of people have recommended Blood Meridian. They're like, that's right up your alley. You'll love it. So I'm going to read that at some point and be the next review. But until then, let's do an ending to this video where we rank the Dune books, in my opinion. So this is my definitive ranking of the Dune books. I think it's probably pretty obvious. But Chapterhouse DUNE is last, in my opinion. To me, it just felt kind of bland. It's got some good ideas. I like the humanization of particular characters, and I like the ideas of stuff that could be out there in the universe, but it just, all the stuff I like the most are the things that are in the book the least. So then at number 5, I'm going to put Heretics of Dune. I feel the same way, except I do like Heretics a little bit better because Teg is a total badass in this book. It does more with Duncan, and I don't know. I just liked it a little bit more, but really I put both books kind of in a similar category. For my number 4 is going to be God Emperor of Dune. I think that this was the best finale to the series. Honestly, if you got rid of these last 2 books, I think God Emperor is a good ending. I like it a lot. I just don't like it as much as the other 3. But I still think it's really good, and I think it's a good finale to the Atreides, you know, Leto Atreides, Paul Atreides timeline. Now, the next one will be a little bit out of order. I think next at number 3, I will put Dune Messiah. There's a lot of stuff I like about this book. It just doesn't give me enough. It doesn't give me as much as the other 2 to sink my teeth into, but I really like the epilogue of Paul and him dealing with the repercussions of what happened in the original. At my number 2, I'm going to put Children of Dune. I absolutely loved this book. I love the sibling dynamic between Leto and Ganima. I like what they did with Paul's character, minus his ending, but in a way it's still it's fitting in a way. I like the other stuff that's going on in this book with Duncan Idaho, Alia getting possessed, you know, by the past memories and personality of the Harkonnens, and I love the sequence with the tigers, and I love when Leto Atreides, you know, absorbs the power of the worms and becomes this fucking crazy maniac. This book is so good. But of course, number 1 is of course the original Dune. It is a sci-fi masterpiece that has stood the test of time for a reason. It's the entire reason I got into wanting to read the series to begin with. I love this book. I thought this was great. I would give it a 10 out of 10. The original Dune cannot be topped. I think it's fantastic. So that is my opinion of the Dune series for whatever that's worth. Thank you guys for watching all of this. Please like the video, comment, subscribe, and if you're a big Dune fan, please help me out with the last 2 books. Help me see things that I don't see to appreciate them more. But other than that, guys, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.